On the line this morning, we're fortunate to have our guest, Matt Faircloth. Matt is with the Derosa Group out of New Jersey. Matt's a real estate investor. He's a syndicator and manages his own stuff. He's also a YouTube channel phenomenon. I found him on YouTube, and I encourage you to check him out as well. Matt, how you doing?
I'm great, Darren. Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure, and looking forward to talking to you today. Before we get running down the track there, I gave a very, very brief introduction about you and the little bit that I've kind of come to know. But can you share with the audience a little bit about your background, how you got into real estate investing?
Sure. Well, I had a full-time day job working for a company called Ingersoll Rand. I was one of their, traveling sales reps selling heavy machinery, and started reading about, alternative ways to reach financial wealth and financial independence, and just alternative ways to make cash flow and stuff like that. Read a lot of Robert Kiyosaki stuff, and started to do some side investments in real estate while I had my job. My first investment was a single family home that I lived in, and had a couple of my friends live with me in the house. This is in my 20s when you do things like that. And that was my first rental. And then we started to buy a few more rentals from there. My girlfriend, now wife, and I started to do that, and then went full time in 2005. Got into some small multi at first. Just a couple of four families was our first, what I would call like a real multifamily purchase, and then scaled it up from there. Got into some office space. We own a 10,000 square foot office building that I occupy with my company, but also have tenants that occupy as well. We got into the economy was in a position that it was favorable for flips in 2005 and 6 and 7, and then became unfavorable for flips for a while there, and now it's back favorable for flip for buy, fix, and flip. So I do a good amount of those projects as well. Our focus these days are on fix and flipping homes, and some new construction projects, and then also on acquisition and management of mid-size multi. So call it like 30 units and up from there, size-wise.
Got it. And you do you buy yourself, and you also do a syndicate, or you make syndication acquisition. Okay.
Primarily, that's what we do. Just syndications enable us to utilize the network we have. We've been doing this for a while. A lot of people are aware of the fact that my wife and my company and I invest in real estate, and these people want to invest in real estate, but just don't have the time to do this business. Not everybody has the time to do, or the means to do what I did, which is to quit my job and do this thing full time. But people want to diversify their wealth and make money elsewhere outside of Wall Street, and want to make it through sticks and bricks of real estate, but they don't have the time or the wherewithal or the knowledge or the whatever, fill in the blank, to do it. And so syndications have been just easy for us because of the network, because of YouTube as well, but also just people that have come to us regularly that have the means but not the time or the whatever gap that they're missing to do this thing themselves, that are happy to invest with us through a syndication. So primarily the mid-sized multis that we do are some form of syndication, whether our own cash is in the deal or not. So that's how we're structured for those. That's why we do it that way.
Got it. And currently, the number of units you have under management, I think you said?
Currently, yeah. We're sitting here, February 2017, we're sitting at 160 units. It's probably going to change very soon. I'm looking at 115 units tomorrow that I really like on paper. I got to go see if I like it in person or not, but I'm looking at that, and I'm also looking at a few larger assets. I'm looking at an asset in Florida right now too. So I expect that number to double by the end of this year. Our goal is to do 200 units this year. So I hope to finish the year above 350.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Growing like you have from either your first single family to 160 units, are they all local so far? Are they near where you are?
They were. I wrote an article for Bigger Pockets a while ago on why I wouldn't do a deal that was more than 30 minutes away from my home, and I think that that's a good For folks just getting started, that's a good rule to have, because you want to be able to go check on it and make sure it's still standing and make sure the tenants haven't, beat the place to the ground on you or anything like that. And also just to go and do preventative maintenance walkthroughs, which it's one of the property management systems that we use, is doing PMs versus just reactive maintenance. But we just bought a 50 or 49 unit in central Pennsylvania that's 2 hours away from my office. And so that was our first remote purchase. And we hired a property management company on that. But the other 110, give or take, I manage with my own team. I've got a team of folks here in Trenton, New Jersey is where we're located. So a team of my folks here in Trenton that help me manage our assets.
Well, my curiosity, I guess, goes kind of to on the growth, on scaling and managing all that. Have you created systems? Is there a path that you follow on each property?
I think that's what enabled us to do it. It's funny, we were actually not that large of a company, partly because of the financial downturn that hit in 08 and 09, and that. So we didn't grow too much through there. We just stabilized what we had, but we also figured out our systemization and got it really, really tight, and we've grown quite a bit since then. In that. So yeah, I think that there's a ton of systems, and just there's systems that we've installed around managing the assets and in acquiring them. And we've done some sales too, not fix and flips, just selling some of our rentals over time. And there's systemizations around that too. So I think that systems play a large part in being able to scale a business, because you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you do it. If you just document it, and you can do it over and over and over again. So
on the acquisition side of things, is there a system that you can point to as far as kind of a 1, 2, 3, how you go about your acquisition model? Do you have any kind of a system?
Sure. Well, there's a few things. So let's say that you and I are looking at an apartment building, and it's in an area that we both is a known city that we're tracking. I'll give you a real example. The other day, I was looking at a deal in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm very interested in Charlotte, North Carolina as a place to invest because it has good economic bones, if you will. Like it's not just relying on one economy. There's job growth. There's cranes over the city. There's construction and stuff like that. And so things are happening. There's money being spent. It's not a stagnant environment. And there's economic growth. So that's why that's one of the reasons why I like Charlotte. Other reasons too. But once I've got a target building, the things that I do that are part of a system, if you will, and obviously, get the underwriting on the property, because 90% of the stuff I look at is represented in some form or fashion by a broker. And so I do a few pass the muster financial overviews, not a full underwriting. So I don't just sit and crunch all the numbers over hours. There's a few rules of thumb that I use, which is, purchase price versus purchase price per unit versus rent per unit per month. There's an equation that I have in there. These are just some quick acid tests. So I would say just quick acid test on the financials, just to see if it's anywhere near where it makes financial sense. Then I check local median income. This building in particular happened to have a median income of just under $20,000 a year, and I look for somewhere in the neighborhood for where the rents were in the building, or what I wanted to see in rent to make the building make sense. You needed to have an economic median around $30,000 to $35,000. So that was we ended up passing on the building, but that was one of the reasons why we ended up passing, is because although there may be good income in the building itself, you got to make sure that there's a wide enough pond of tenants that live in an area to rent from you. And so that's one of the second things that we do from a system, is always look at the affordability index to say, okay, this is the median income. This is how much rent I want to get. Is there a good enough ratio there to do a go, no go? And then we look at local crime. So those are all before I even get in a car, before I get on an airplane, before I spend any more than more than an hour on a property, I can gauge all that in 15 minutes. So that's the first step on a systemization of a property.
So on the area, I just want to back up there 1 second. So Is there a specific size of a metro area that you look to? Is there any kind of a minimum that you, when you're investing? You mentioned Charlotte. I don't know the population of Charlotte, but I think it's significant. I don't know what
It is.
million, north of a million.
Yeah, we don't normally look for that. I've done better, believe it or not, in smaller cities than Charlotte. I own one building in Philadelphia, which is a enormous city, but I tend not to track what you would call like a tier one, like a large mega city or anything like that, or a city that has a splash or economic footprint that's way larger than itself, and everything like that. I go for like a tier two city, like we were. No offense to any listeners you have that are like in Cincinnati or Cleveland or anything like that, but I don't, those aren't to me tier one cities. They're really solid tier two cities. So just a little smaller in size, I think a little more manageable and a little easier to establish yourself in the network of cities like that. Charlotte's a little larger than we normally go because I think you can kind of get lost in the noise of big cities like that. And lastly, big cities always draw more competition. And a lot of investors I know of are doing business in Atlanta and in Dallas, Fort Worth and in Houston, and I would not touch those cities. And it's not because I don't like the metrics. It's just too much competition in cities like that because it's very obvious and prevalent. Those are growing areas. And so Charlotte's a little larger than I normally go because I like to be able to stay under the radar and be a little larger fish.
Yeah, big fish in a small pond kind of thing.
Yeah, which is why Philly, because when Philly got hot, we used to do a lot of business there, but Philadelphia has gone off the charts in economic growth. And so a lot of the bigger players have come into Philly, and so Philly just doesn't make sense anymore financially to buy a mid-sized multi that I've seen. So we've steered clear of Philadelphia.
Got it. And then you were mentioning the average area median income.
Yes.
And what is there you mentioned a range, but I'm kind of curious, what's the correlation to the rent you're looking to get? Is there a 30% of the average area median income?
That's it.
Is it
my number.
Okay,
that's
well,
it.
I was saying that was kind of the one. I remember the first time I got a home, the mortgage was that was the magic number there, and it kind of
what? True. That's the thing. There's very little reinventing of anything you have to do in this world. And so if a mortgage underwriter wants to see around those numbers from a debt to income without really looking at the person's other debts they have, but in looking at their housing expense to their income, if around 30% is the number you want to see, that they want to see as a mortgage underwriter, odds are those people know what they're doing and they've done a ton of actuarial evaluations of that and make sure, and they've said like, okay, well, people can typically stay in their home if they can stay around that income level, unless they just dig themselves a huge hole for debt elsewhere, which is maybe what happened, in our economy not too long ago. But if that's what works for them, that works for me too. So that's what I used, 30% of median income.
No, that holds water. Haven't heard anybody else explain why it wouldn't hold water, so that's good. So you kind of boil it down to if it meets those parameters, you've got growth in an area, you've got the rent to income ratios are kind of fit. Run your property analysis, make a decision then whether or not to make an offer. Is that kind of the? Well,
there's like the first phase is like a go no go, right? Is that like, okay, 1, 2, 3 Main Street's a go because it passed. It's above, the median income's above that rent threshold, right? It's not in a low like a high crime area, right? Because you're not going to you're not going to shift an entire neighborhood if there's a lot of crime there. You're not going to shift it. You can hope to get in better tenants that are going to fight it off and that are going to not participate in that. But, it's going to be hard to get better tenants. Nothing's impossible. So this building in Charlotte that we looked at, that we passed on, could have been easily done by somebody else, but it just was going to be too much of a lift for us. I'm not looking for heavy lift stuff or pushing against the grain of the market. The building actually was only 70% occupied, which didn't scare me and it was upside down it was underwater, meaning the building wasn't able to make any type of debt payment. We were going to need to buy the building 100% cash. And And all those things didn't scare me. What scared me was the surrounding neighborhood, things I can't change. And so in the first step, I'm evaluating things that are, call it like just factors I cannot control. Okay.
Right.
And
Right.
I consider that to be the median income of the area, crime, and then just general logistics. I didn't get into this, Darren, but like pull the building up on Google, like look at it to see geographically where it is. And is this like, right off the highway? Is it a convenient location? Is it out in the middle of nowhere? Is it sitting right next to a dump? Like not like a property dump, but like literally maybe like the
Yeah.
town dump, or someplace that might smell really bad, or just things I can't change, right?
Right.
And if there are no unchangeable factors by my standard, then I will take the next step. The next step is crunching through the numbers on the deal and underwriting it basis the standards that I use for what I would put in there for management, what I think that maintenance is going to cost, what I want to set aside for capital reserves. Calling a guy like yourself, which is huge. I mean, I don't think a lot of guys do this, but when they're evaluating an apartment building, but I think that you should get your insurance guy into the building, or not into the building, but into the conversation early, because I've found that what a lot of people do is they assume that whatever deal the current owner is getting on insurance is going to be exactly the same as what deal they're going to get.
No
And
kidding. Yep.
right. And I find that to be so wrong in so many different ways that they could be underinsured. They could be undercovered. Unfortunately, I find that most of the time it's the other way, is that the guy is completely just has the wrong coverage for the building. And, just for one reason or another, the insurance is costing them way more than it should. And they didn't get there. Just ask for a copy of the insurance deck page and send
Right.
it to your insurance guy and have him take a look at it and say, not just can you beat this, but what do you think of this coverage? And my guy typically shreds it when he gets a look at that and says, this is crazy. So,
Yeah, no, you're preaching to the choir right there. Not to
of
get too
course.
far off the topic here, but the property we just bought here, the seller didn't have any loan against it, so they're able to kind of insure it however they wanted to, which is not
It's
exactly.
dangerous, isn't it?
Oh yeah,
That's,
and
yeah.
we were borrowing money, so we had a different set of parameters,
Yeah.
and had we used his number, and he was, it was definitely underinsured, but even to your point with that, and we'll get back on track with this, is that to have somebody that you trust that can look through it, because I've seen, like you mentioned, coverage is not being there.
Mm-hmm.
Even simple things like loss of rents. I was blown away that, a number I was
Yeah.
looking at, the guy didn't have loss of rents. I'm like, all it takes is a fire, and fire is the
yeah.
number one cooking, is the number one cause
Oh,
of
yeah.
fires. And, it usually doesn't just affect one unit, it's going to affect multiple units. So you could
Absolutely.
be out, multiple units in rent. But,
Well, that's why it's important in general, not just your insurance guy, but also just to have your professionals lined up, and realize that as you start to take phase two of evaluation of these deals and really roll your sleeves up and jump into the numbers before you get in the car and go out for a site visit, is to have folks to run this by. If you're outsourcing management, which I've done and also do myself, but I also outsource, to get my property manager in the conversation early. And obviously I pull my own rent data. The brokers love to tell you what they think it should rent for, but they're not actually going to go lease it for you. So you should probably pull your own rent data to validate the rent comps they're giving you. But I outsource most of my stuff to property managers that are of this size. So I give those rent comps to my property manager to have them go pull down to verify that they can get those rents. The 49 unit we just bought, the owner was getting probably $150 a month less than what he could be getting. And my property manager I hired looked at it and said, this is a huge opportunity for us to go and simply just bring rents up to market. And the units were in good condition, right? So without that professional to run these things by during the second phase of evaluation, that's when you start to uncover gaps, opportunities, potential challenges and opportunities. So what I do is while I'm underwriting, I've got my handy dandy notepad out and I'm just writing down questions, just what are the condition of the kitchen? How old is it's a lot of times for single sites like this, for large sites, you'll have, and again, this is maybe East Coast, maybe not so much in other parts of the world or in the South or whatnot, but it's common to have a large boiler, a large heater that's heating all the hot water and all the heat for the entire site, right? And so that's an enormous liability to have that machine heating everything. I'm not talking about insurance liability. I'm talking about what if that thing breaks? Because unfortunately, I've had that happen.
Yep.
So it's a question I write down. How old is that machine? How often do they maintain it? When's the last time they serviced it? That whole thing. So I make my list of questions I want to get if I were to go walk it while I'm underwriting. And then if the numbers come up to at least like a range of like, let's say within 15% of where I want to be, dollar wise, then I will go out and see the property. And then that's when the pencil sharpening comes out, because it's hard to tell real performance of a building just on paper. You really got to go see it and see, even if they tell you the roof's been replaced and the windows are new and everything like that, you got to get yourself on an airplane and go out and see it in person once it's past those first two steps.
Right. When you're going through the property, obviously the numbers are really what drive the economics of the property, whether it's like you mentioned, 150 light on market area rents. That's a huge opportunity. If it's only 70% occupied, or those are some things to get excited about potential. But as far as the condition of the property itself, do you have kind of a checklist you go through? You mentioned, if you realize it's got a boiler, do you have a system that you go through on that? Is it all kind of just a property checklist, or how do you?
We do. I have a property checklist we use, but the checklist kind of starts at the heavy stuff first, right? So when you're looking at a multifamily, you got to start at a macroscopic level on things that are going to cost you a lot of money, and then start zooming down from there, right? So you look at the roof structures, the windows, like the outside envelope. So like let's is the roof like leaking, or is it in brand new or in good condition? Look at the window encasements. Are those good, or do those need to be replaced anytime soon? Because if you've got any more than a couple of units, new windows add up. You're talking tons. It could be a major investment to change out windows on an 80-unit apartment building, right? So that's, each unit has 5 windows times 80, times 80 units times, a couple $100 a window. You just spent a lot of money right there. Then you look at heating systems. Then a next step down would be electrical. I always go and open up panels when I'm there to see what units are rated for. We actually got pretty far on it, but we got pretty far on a 96-unit building we were going to buy. The units were all 100 amps, which was fine. But then we found out through a site inspection with an engineer that the building was wired. Now you're an insurance guy, so you'll get why this is a bad thing. The building was wired with aluminum wiring.
Whoops.
Yeah, right. And I didn't know that was a concern. But my inspector was like, whoa, time out. And then I called my insurance guy, and he said the same thing. I was like, well, your number just went up 3 times what it would have been if it was just copper, right?
Yeah. So, and that was kind of there was a few years in there when I think copper got expensive and aluminum was less expensive, and so the market kind of went that way. But what was
big deal, right?
What was the vintage of that property? Late 60s, early 70s?
Yeah, late 60s, early 70s. Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird few years there, and you don't run into it all the time, but clearly that was kind of the phase there, and people don't think about it. But because even like your big transmission lines that run across the country, those are aluminum, but they buzz at a different frequency than the copper, and it causes that stuff to kind of shake loose at the switch. And you can have an arc and a spark and a fire, and
it's all about, insurance is all about probability, right? Yep. And in that, it's about, there is a higher probability of a fire, even if it's a small, if the probability of a fire in your property is like 0.0005%, it's maybe 0.0010% if it's aluminum, which just is not because the insurance company's trying to make money off of you or whatever. It's that just there is a higher probability of an insurable claim in a property with copper wiring. And so it was going to cost us, let's say on this size building, not $20,000 a year, $60,000 a year in insurance. So for that reason alone, and a bunch of other stuff with this guy, obviously, because if a seller is sweeping stuff like that under the rug, then they're sweeping other stuff under the rug too. And so he wasn't being truthful about the wiring, and he claimed he didn't know. He had no idea. Okay, so the guy owned the building for years, so he was aware of it. And there's other stuff that got swept under the rug too. And so we ended up backing out for all those reasons. But that's why when you're on site, you start macro and start going micro. I think a lot of times when landlords walk buildings, they immediately start looking at kitchen layouts and flooring types and common areas and laundries and stuff like that, which we do too. But that's not my first. The broker just can't wait to take me inside the building and show me the model unit. I'm like, well, listen, I don't want to see that first. Right. I want to walk the outside. Show me the boiler room. Show me the mechanicals. Put me up on the roof. Is there a roof hatch I can get up to or something like that? That's where I want to start when I evaluate a building. Is all the way out, and then I work my way in.
No, you're speaking exactly like an insurance underwriter there. It's you mentioned like the windows. You start talking about like, God, how much is it going to cost to replace the windows, and you start doing that. That's exactly the same way the insurance company looks at it. It's like, God, if the aluminum wiring, is something that can change their model, because they're running on model, number of models. Sure. The actuaries have set it up and said, hey, that this, if these systems are in place, we got a good chance. Once you start straying outside that, then we got a chance to lose money and pay claims. And everybody's in business to make money.
Windows are two things, right? Windows are actually, there are a lot of things. Windows, the reason why you want to pay attention to windows is it's expensive to replace a lot of them. And they are, if the tenants are paying their own heat, the tenants will, if the windows are drafty, the tenants may notice and complain to you about it, and maybe even move out because it's expensive to live there. I got one building that's a converted factory, and it's got these beautiful, ornate, like 9-foot tall windows. And you got little panelized, window pieces sitting, glass panes sitting in them, and they look great, except for when you put your hand up against them when it's 20 degrees outside, and you can just feel that's how
the ice on the inside.
What's that?
Feel the ice on the inside of the window there.
Right. Yeah. Oh, what's it like outside? Let me put my hand on the window and I'll tell you. And so that's become an issue for that building, and that's how I learned is that you've got to be careful about window glazing because it's a thermal envelope. It's major contribution to heat loss. And if you're paying the heat, you better pay attention to your windows because that'll cost you a ton of money if they leak. Additionally, it's like I said, it's a lot of money to replace, and there's the outside of the building too, and it's just something that can add up quickly if you have to deal with that. So,
right,
yeah.
So you start with the systems, you go macro to micro, you work
systems,
your way
mechanicals,
yeah.
Then you go to value add.
Okay.
Then you go to value add from there. And people, you don't get is that like, although a kitchen may be dated and, might not be pretty and might not have the floor tile that I like and everything like that, if there is a tenant in there that's paying rent, that's happy, it's fine, and if the unit's close to market, that for now it's fine. And that landlords have to realize that it's not a fix and flip. And I have worked with landlords that got into landlording after they were in heavy construction or into fix and flips or whatever it is, and they want to make everything beautiful. And they think that like that's what it's going to take to fit out this unit. No, you got to evaluate the market. Shoot some pictures of that kitchen, and then one thing I do that I'm not sure if everybody else does: go see a competitive apartment complex. Yep. Maybe you have to go undercover and get your James Bond going on there, but pretend to be a prospective tenant looking to rent that place. And see how your kitchen is going to compare to that, because any new tenant is going to do the same thing. They're going to go see your place. They're going to go see the other place too.
Yep, that's the competition.
Yeah, go see it. Go see what they got.
No, you might
be surprised. Might be surprised that your kitchen actually
it's
dated.
Not that bad.
Yeah, ain't that bad. Hey, but most likely what's happened. So that's it doesn't happen all the time. But what happens more likely is that the landlord is aging out and has been doing this for a really long time and is starting to let the property go and has not updated their kitchens, and in order to maintain their tenant base is also not raising his rent. And so you see there's typically, for new properties that are for sale right now, there's a gap between what the market is for properties that have traded recently and the owner came in and blew out the kitchens and spent a bunch of money on the place. There's that, and he's maybe getting another $100, $150, $200 a month for his units versus what this property is getting, that this owner's been willing to take a discounted rent so he doesn't have to deal with it. He's
Right.
going to invest. That's the first sign of a late, it's, no judgment for your listeners that have been doing this for a while, but for a landlord that is not looking to put in a ton of effort anymore and is looking to, coast on it and not make big investments in their property, you might see that. And so an opportunity that's there is it's just economic opportunity to come in and say, okay, what am I going to get if I put in a new countertop, new flooring, reface the cabinets, because typically you shouldn't replace them if you can just reface them, meaning like take the covers off, paint them, put new handles. It's like half the cost or less to do that versus replace. Small bath upgrades, everything like that. What can I get another $150 a month for that couple of $1,000 investment? And if the answer is yes, then you want to just put all that into your operating budget and look to do that as units vacate. And that's more of an economic evaluation, but that is the second part of the walkthrough, and it's what a lot of people do first. And I actually would go the other way and look at mechanical systems, things that are cost you a ton of money, insurance liabilities, that kind of stuff first, and then go in the units and start, deciding how you want to rearrange things.
No, I like that because I think you're absolutely right. People get kind of sucked into the unit, and there's some sort of a sense I'm going to live here and it's going to be pretty, and I want it to. And it's like no.
But you're not though.
Yeah.
You're not. You're going to live there, and
you
then you got to look at what the market wants.
Yeah.
What's the market asking for units? And maybe it's stainless steel, and maybe it's like, God bless granite to have to do that in all your units. I mean, we don't have to do that, but I mean, if you do, if that's what you got to do, that's what it is. And if you can get the return for it, if you're in like a premium A-level neighborhood, then maybe you can get $3,000 a month for granite countertops and stainless steel,
Right.
and that. But I tend not to play in neighborhoods like that because it's just I don't want to be at that level. I like more workforce housing where that's not a standard that's required. So a nice kitchen is good enough in the neighborhoods I do business in.
Yeah, no, I was just talking to my property manager about that the other day. Clean and safe. That's the kind of the, let's say make it clean. So paint and polish whatever we got.
Yeah.
Make sure it's all
and you
very
can make
functional.
It look nice.
Oh yeah, paint's amazing.
There are affordable upgrades you can do that are nice, that are good quality, but don't have to be gorgeous, where these units could be condos at some point and be sold for a high number or something like that. They could still be clean and safe, and still, of a nice finish too, that tenants are proud of and want to have somebody come over and visit them and look at their new, maybe engineered hardwood, maybe not brand new Brazilian cherry wood, but just maybe like an engineered floating floor or something like that's fine with a laminate top on it at $1.10 a square foot.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I the other thing I always say is something that is easy to turn. Something we can get in and out and get the keys to the next tenant there. So that's all good. So you've gone from the macro, you've gotten into the units, you've kind of identified what is, built that into your operating budget.
I'm going more and more micro as I go.
Yep.
I mean, like after I've done at that 10,000 feet, then I drop the airplane down to 5,000 feet. Then I'm, looking closer and closer to whereas I'm going more and more micro as I've walked a unit and everything like that. At some point during my walkthrough, I try and catch a tenant in the hallway and talk to them.
Okay.
In that a lot of times the broker and the property manager don't like you to do that. So I like to pretend it happened on accident, and that whole thing. And you're probably not going to get very much time with them. But I tried to find out, like, hey, just how do you like living here? What do you like about this place? Not like you can't immediately go to what's wrong with this apartment complex and tell me about it, but just you could just gauge their enthusiasm on their living environment and see if they treat it like a place that's their home or a place that they just have to live in.
Right.
It's a very different caliber of tenant happiness, and that's something I gauge for the stuff that we own and manage. Tenant happiness is something that I take into consideration because happy tenants tend to pay their rent on time more likely and tend to stay longer and tend to treat the place with respect. I got one property where my tenants are really happy. The tenants planted a garden behind the place.
Oh,
and they landscaped this multifamily. My tenants they're saving me money. They're landscaping it for me, the outside. So, if they're not happy, they're not doing that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Happy tenants.
Yeah.
That's a good
Yeah.
good target there.
Mm-hmm.
So you're continue to go kind of micro on this thing. Um, we've been in the units, we've assessed them, we've talked to a couple of tenants. You're feeling pretty good about this, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry. No, there's been no. It's not you're not rating at this point when you're big macro on the outside and looking at the roof, windows, boilers. You're looking for showstoppers, like aluminum wiring. Okay,
Right.
you find that, okay, I'm done. You find a boiler that's 30 years old and it's leaking all over, and it's going to cost you 30 grand to replace it, and it's a smaller complex, and that would be like a year's worth of cash flow, and the owner's not willing to do anything about it. Okay, done.
Next,
Out.
thanks. Yeah.
Right. Then you start getting into, once you're done the big macro stuff, those are all the showstoppers. Then you start getting into the operations. And I start putting myself in the place of the owner and saying, okay, what would I do if I own this place? What would I do? Would I clean the common areas? Would I clean up the units with this, that? And then by the time that I'm done the walkthrough, I've pretty much decided if I'm going to if I'm going to make an offer or not, because I've kind of I've evaluated everything that I would need to at that point. We can talk about laundry rooms, by the way. The laundry room is something on the macro side that's like a go no go. If it's there, if it's, I mean, is it clean? Great, but also, is it there, and what is the contractual arrangement with the people that are managing that thing? Because I used to manage it myself, but then I got tired of driving around with huge bags of quarters in my car all the time. It gets old after a while.
Right. The low rider there with all your quarters in the car.
Right. Yeah, it was fun for a little bit, but then you had to go and deal with it once you got them. And so we use a contractual relationship with the servicing company. And those contracts typically transfer. And like the one building that we bought, a guy had a 20-year contract with the company that was managing the stuff. So you better be happy with them, and their terms better be good. And that. So I wanted to see that contract when I was there. And, that, not that kind of money coming across the table is a necessary showstopper, but it is something that needs to get negotiated up front on, what is your contract with the people that are managing those machines? And if there is no contract, if you're doing it yourself, how much revenue you're really making, because you might not be telling me everything. A lot of times those guys don't like to claim that kind of stuff if they're managing it themselves, because for the cash side of it or whatever. So, but you want to get your head around what the revenue really is and what it's really going to be if you outsource it. So that's one of the things that are macro too.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've been from the 30,000 feet. We're down now. We're on the ground.
Yeah.
We've come all the way down to the ground. We landed.
Yeah.
Everything's looking good. You are feeling pretty good. At this point, are you ready to make the offer?
Yeah, we do, and we've already. I mean, I'm probably going to run back to my office and tweak the underwriting a bit further and say, okay, I had in here, I don't know, $600 a month for maintenance, and I might look at that and say, okay, I've seen the site, and maybe it's a big enough site that entails a full-time maintenance guy. And maybe I can peel that number back because there's going to be a full-time maintenance guy, or maybe maybe they didn't put this in the numbers, but the maintenance guy actually has a unit on site that they didn't count in the unit that's not in the unit count, and you could write that off as part of his compensation, is that he gets a free place to live, right? So things like that tend to tweak numbers. Obviously, if the roof's only got 10 years left, I need to put a few more bucks in my capital reserve account to deal with that roof when it does go bad. So that's when you sharpen up the pencil on your numbers. And then with those sharpened numbers, we write up a letter of intent. And what I will do normally is I will share my numbers in the offer, is at least a broad brush on my numbers to say, like, we project that the net operating income is going to be this. And we see that your rental income is this. And, to give them data to back up my offer, especially if it's not, offering them a huge number way above asking or something like that. We want to at least come up with something that justifies where we're coming from. And we also at that point have to pound our chest a little bit and make sure they know that we can close and that we are capable of getting this deal to the table. Perhaps a letter of support from a financial institution. If I have that already, maybe a little bit of our track record, that whole thing. So we put together not just a one-page offer. You gotta sell them a little bit on why they should take yours.
Choose you, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because we're typically not a retrade, like a lot of what a lot of people for remote buildings will do. When I say a remote, I mean like you're in Oregon, and if you're looking at a building in, Texas or something like that, to not even get on an airplane, to just take the broker's underwriting and send them an offer, you know. So, right.
Yeah.
I know it scares you too, doesn't
Yeah.
it? It
Yeah.
scares me also. But
Yeah.
the probability of you doing something called a retrade on something like that is probably 100%. Because what's going to happen is you're going to go out and see it. And you're like, oh wait, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And so what we do is we say, listen, we saw the place. This is what we saw. This is our write up. This is everything that we think, and this is a great number that we can stand behind, and we're going to close at this number. So we put together a good, call it a sales pitch, on why Derosa Group as our buyer. We present that, and then if we get the agreement, then it's on to the next step.
Question on your, you mentioned your capital reserve. Do you have any kind of a formula you use for determining what's an appropriate capital reserve?
Well, you gotta add up. There's a baseline number that you should use, which some guys talk somewhere between $100 to $200 a unit, which is just like a rule of thumb, if you will. And that a lot of times that's what I start with. And then once you walk the site, you look for your big capex items, and you start to say things like, I'm going to have to replace that boiler at some point in the next 5 years. It's healthy now, but it might not be soon. And that roof looks like it might need some work soon. And you ask questions like, when's the last time the roof was replaced? Oh, 15 years ago. Okay, got it. If I plan on holding this building for a long time, I want to set aside a few dollars. And so maybe I look online for a rule of thumb on what a new roof cost, put a little bit of bump in there for inflation. And then, so let's say, I'll give you real numbers. Let's say a new roof's going to cost me $50,000, right? In year 10, I want to put a new roof on. So I want to set aside conservatively $5,000 a month, $5,000 a year in capex to pay for the roof in year 10. I'm really, really simplifying it right there, but
Right.
But you add on to that couple $100 per unit per year. You add on reserves for real time things that you're going to have to do, or you want to put in your budget to set aside for.
Got it.
And oh, by the way, you tell the owner that when you're making the offer, to say, yeah, I would give you this number, but I have to set aside $5,000 a year for a new roof because you told me that roof's 20 years old, and so I need to start saving up, right? So
Right. No, you're basically using their information and run it through the system.
Say, hey, you said this. I agree with you. It looks like that would be the same case. So obviously, it only makes sense for me to start doing a set aside for that. So.
Got it. So you present your offer.
Mm-hmm.
You do the back and forth. We get a strike price.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's in agreement. The due diligence now starts.
Yep.
What's your due diligence process look like? Your system?
Well, this is assuming this is a pretty straightforward deal. That it's nothing crazy. Like the deal we were looking at in Charlotte was going to need to be some sort of creative financing piece in there. But let's assume that things like seller take back, seller financing, just paying the seller back over time or something like that. Let's assume none of that happens, right? This is a straight finance deal. We're going to get a loan. We're going to bring in equity. And we're going to close. So a lot of things happen at the same time when you do that. Like a lot of stopwatches all start, right? So there's the finance part of it where we engage the people that invest with my company, with the Derosa Group as equity investors. We engage them and let them know what we're looking to do and give them our business model and business plan for the site. And say, this is what this is going to look like. This is, what the return we think is going to be. This is a lot of things that we're projecting. Are you interested? And so we engage our equity raise. Okay. I then also, while that's happening, I'm also engaging the lenders that are going to lend to us on the project, and pretty much send them the same underwriting I sent everybody else. Say, this is what I think. This is how it's going to look financially. And I engage the lender as well, and they, will typically shoot back a term sheet pretty quickly to let me know what terms are going to look like. And if I'm thinking ahead and proactive, which I am, and other folks should be too. I've probably already talked to that lender to get my feel in the market as I'm underwriting the deal to say, okay, I can borrow money at X on these terms. Is what they're reading the tea leaves and letting me know roughly what they think things are going to look like. So that's there, and then I validate those things and try and lock it down with the term sheet pretty quickly. Other due diligence things, the bank dictates a lot of the due diligence with regards to environmental. Like some banks on larger deals want to bring out a separate engineer, not environmental engineer, like just a structural engineer or somebody to come and check out the property. Appraisals, all those things happen. And then from my side of it, what I do is I will then bring out some local trades. The building we bought out in central Pennsylvania, I brought out a HVAC guy. I brought out a plumber. I brought out a roofer. I brought out property manager. At that point, I'd already engaged, but I brought them out in their team to help me evaluate the building and the large trades like the roofer and everything like that. You bring them out just to verify that I got up on the roof. Which is what I saw. But you typically don't do those kinds of things when you're evaluating a deal to purchase. You can just go check it out, and that's something that you do during due diligence. And if something gets uncovered, that's a huge problem. It never happened to us, but something you completely didn't see, or they swept under the rug, and your roofer uncovers it, or the HVAC guy uncovers something. That's why they have due diligence, because for large purchases like this, you're allowed to renegotiate the deal if something unheard of comes up in that typically 30 to 45 day time frame.
Got it. Anything you look for in particular with regards to owner documentation? Is there anything you've uncovered that's worthwhile? Or
Sure. You want to get a copy of all their contracts. Again, this is where things like you should have already come up already, but the contract they have with the laundry company, contract they have. Oh, we bought a building and the guy had a 5-year contract with his dumpster company, and he didn't tell us about it. He just told us, I pay the dumpster company, $500 a month. That's what I pay them, but didn't tell me that he was under agreement for that.
Right.
And they had escalation in there and everything like that. So those types of things, contractual arrangements, you want to get copies of. You want to get copies of all the leases. Get copies of. I typically ask for 18 months worth of all utilities, and then I put those in a spreadsheet and put them on a chart. Like I like to graph them out to see how utilities are behaving over the year, and that. Let's see. Yeah, that's it on owner documentation. And obviously, if you haven't done this already, I put in a call to the town on the certificate of occupancy to make sure the property's in good standing. You should be doing this before you buy. Just a quick phone call to the town just to pick their brain on it a little bit. I got a friend who calls I don't do this, but he calls the local police and asks them how many calls they've had out there. He looks on crime data on websites, but he also calls the police and asks them what their opinion is, because police will gladly tell you their opinion of properties and crime stats and stuff like that. So
I was going to say even the mailman, on the route there.
It's a great idea.
I remember years ago trying to figure out a property and saw the mailman, and just, oh yeah, this place, it's great. And it's like, okay, well, at least we got one validation, somebody that sees the property every day, and probably during a time when, not all the residents are there, kind of thing. So, or if all the residents are there causing trouble during the day when the mailman's afraid to go there, that's not a good day. But
that's a good point. That's a good point. If they're all home when he's there, that's a bad thing because they should be at work.
Yeah.
It's I've never done that. That's actually a really good indication. I know a few real estate investors that started out as mailmen. That's how they got into the business, by just walking the route and casing out hey, that property's been vacant, or that property's really poorly managed. I'm gonna see if I can put together a deal to buy that property. So yeah, that's a good point.
Some of the clues.
Everything leaves clues. Everything leaves a footprint. So that's the due diligence checklist that we do. There's a whole environmental side of it for doing a phase one, and and everything too. And a lot of times the bank, although we have to pay for it, the bank dictates that on how it's going to go. So.
Sure. So, just kind of, I mean, we've been through pretty much the acquisition kind of questions on a system, how to assess a property. Let's talk a little bit about the property management, because let's say now you've closed on the property, it's yours, and it's something that's not local or local. It's you manage it, or you have a property manager. Are there any kind of systems you have in place there for your property management?
Sure. For the stuff that we do in-house, we have a ton of systems that we use for property management. I mean, first of all, we've got rent standards for, like, let's start at the beginning of the cycle, like, putting a tenant into a vacant unit. We have a certain standard that we're the Derosa Group, so we have the Derosa standard that we rehab our properties to meet. And so we have our own paint color that's on the walls. We have our own carpet. We have, specific carpet color. We even have specific cabinets and stuff like that we use in all of our rentals. So everything's, if you've seen one, you've seen them all, kind of thing. That's the renovation standard that we do if a unit vacates, and then a little more money the first time it vacates under our ownership, but then the cost to do a turnover is very minimal because it's just maintaining that standard, and that's why we paint all the same color, because we can just go in there and just touch up paint it without having to re-roll the walls every time a tenant moves out. That's step one of standards we use, is just on developing to a certain standard and holding to that. And then vetting out tenants, we've got leasing standards we use. We've got how often the property is supposed to be relisted on things like Craigslist, and things we do to establish what rent we want to ask, like market research, that whole thing. So then you go to move in from there.
All right, and you mentioned you've got some turn procedures. How often do you guys have the units inspected? We do
I mean, obviously anytime there's a maintenance issue, our maintenance guy goes in, and he's also looking around for things like, smoke detectors, because tenants love to take those smoke detector batteries out and put them in the remote control when the remote control battery dies. They think the batteries up there are just free batteries that we give them for them to use later, so
10-year lithium, it works, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. That's a newer product. Maybe we just discovered it, but maybe it's been out forever, but not a hardwired smoke system, but they're making batteries or smoke detectors that have an encased battery compartment that the tenant can't get into. And it's got a 10-year life on it. And so that we've switched over to that for the combos, because they can't go taking the batteries out and put it in the remote control. And we have some units that have high ceilings, like with the ceiling, vaulted ceilings and stuff like that. And it's a concern for my guy to have to get up there. So we'll put LEDs in the lights, not just because we want to save the tenant energy, but also because we don't have to deal with anybody, either a liability from a tenant or my maintenance guy changing out those bulbs. And so I try and think, at least 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, anytime that I'm doing something. Short answer to your question is, yeah, we do PM about once every 6 to 9 months. And it's interesting because obviously you've told me, a lot of listeners you have already own their own properties and they might be using property managers that are managing their assets. I would say it's an important thing to make sure that your property manager is doing it, or that you yourself are doing it if you're self-managing, is to do a PM walkthrough. Because we've always, when we do PM walkthroughs, we find just little minor things that will turn into major things if you let them go, and additionally, it's a good tenant happiness thing. Going back to the tenant happiness concept, the tenants see that you care. They see that you're not just there just looking for a rent check, and that you actually are concerned about their living space. We've seen potential liability hazards like rips in carpets, and like one of my tenants just took the cover plate off of one of their electrical outlets, because they needed it or because it broke or whatever. I forget why it was, but it's just exposed wire sitting there right behind the electrical outlet, and they had kids, so it's like, okay, well,
like these, yeah,
right. You see if it's hot or not, but It's things like that you do. You might never see it if the tenant doesn't call you, and some tenants just never call you for maintenance issues. And short-sightedly, that's a good thing. But if you're playing the long game in this business, you want to get in there and make sure that it's in good shape. And before the tenant moves out 5 years from now, and you find out they've completely been destroying the place, and now you got to go in.
Yeah, but they paid the rent on time, right? So
Sure, yeah, but they pay the rent on time.
that's
Yeah.
right.
A lot of times we do those pre-em walkthroughs, we'll find stuff that needs to get done and we'll charge it back to the tenant. Like we're not going to just do it for free. Sometimes it's on us, but we'll also make a repair and send them an invoice along with their rent bill for the next month for, you broke a code violation. You took that
Smoke
cover plate
detector
off that
battery,
electrical.
yeah.
Yeah, smoke detector batteries are huge.
Yeah.
Because it's like it had battery when you moved in, and
Yep.
now all of a sudden it doesn't, and it's sitting on your kitchen counter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I want to ask you though on an operation side of things here with the rent. You bought a
Yep.
value add opportunity. The property's under rented.
Mm-hmm.
How do you guys go about bringing the property up to market? Do you do it all at the same time? Do you kind of do it in phases? How do you?
I've talked to landlords elsewhere, and in other parts of the world. As I understand it, you're allowed to just go to tenants and say, "Hey, looks to me like $800 a month is what the market is for rent, and it looks to me like you're paying $550, and so I just want to give you a heads up that in 60 days from now, your rent's going to be $800 a month, if the tenant's month to month, if they're not under contract on a long period of time and whatnot." You cannot do that I know of in New Jersey and Pennsylvania where I landlord as of right now. And I know in other states that are just have different landlord tenant laws, you can do that. So we tend not to. And also it depends on whether I want the tenants to stay or not. But what we have done is we have sent them a letter, all the tenants, to say, welcome, we're a new manager, because by the way, the owner's not going to tell their tenants they're selling. Just about no owner I know of has ever done that. Typically, it's this total surprise to the tenant the day after closing. Then people in different logo shirts show up and say, "Hey, wait a minute, we're the new property manager." So I typically will send the tenants a letter soon after closing to let them know all the great things we're going to do and how great of an experience this is going to be. And Ray Ross Boom Bomb, we're going to clean this up, we're going to re-landscape, and we're going to make it a great property, and we really care. And we're going to start renovating vacant units, and we're going to be charging this. Just so you know, this is what the rents are going to be going to for vacant units. If you would like one of those vacant units, we would incentivize you to move into a vacant unit. So we offer them incentive. If you don't want to stay here anymore and you're not happy with where this is going, we'll guarantee you full security deposit return, no questions asked, but you got to move in the next 30 days, and we'll give you your security deposit back. And once a unit's vacated, you can charge whatever you want, right?
Right.
But the concern comes in if you've got an occupied unit and the tenant wants to stay. In New Jersey and Pennsylvania, as I understand it, people may be able to challenge me on this one, but I have heard that I've understood by talking to my attorney, it's only 3.5% a year is the most you can increase the rent. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting because, here in Portland, Oregon, we've had dramatic increases over the last couple of years, so much so that the Portland City Council just passed a
rent control.
measure. Yep. And they don't call it rent control, but it's a temporary measure. But it's if you increase the rent more than 9%, okay, you are subject to paying the tenant. It runs from, I want to say, like from $2,400 to $4,500 per unit based on the number of bedrooms, so that they'll move out for their moving. I was like, holy crap, it's a dicey situation, and it's been challenged by the local multifamily association, and
Sure.
they got struck down. But it's
I have a question. Is that on leasing to that's there is an occupied property and Jane Smith lives in the property, and I go to Jane Smith and I say, I'm going to go and take your rent up 15%, right?
Yep.
That's in that circumstance. But if Jane Smith moves out and John Doe comes in, I can charge John Doe whatever I want. Is that situation?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, that's even the fact of paying the tenants one thing, but the fact that they're even allowed to go 9%, right? In Portland is different. In Oregon in general is different than the way it is here, because in most places and on this side of the world it's 3% is the most you can do. And so what you want to do is Identify your bad apples because there's always bad apples. As soon as you get under management, that's probably one of the procedures we do. Find out who's paying their rent late. Find out who's causing problems. I even ask other tenants like, "Hey, how's it going out here? Anybody, anybody in this complex? You have any problems? with Anybody? Everything like that. Oh yeah, these people are here play their music late, and they're always having parties, and they park their car on the lawn, like
Right.
and
Right.
that whole thing. And so we tend to try and weed out the bad apples because there's always that. That along with just renovating to a better standard and raising rents as we go, if we can, and letting tenants know we're going to do that, tends to shift the caliber of the area. So once we're under ownership, that's our next phase.
Got it.
Yeah.
Um, from a system standpoint, we've started off from assess a property, or I guess a market, a property, get down into the units. We've acquired a property. Now we're operating a property.
We bought it. We're managing
Yeah,
it now.
I mean, you're making money now. I mean, that's the
Right.
plan, right?
Hopefully so.
Do you have any kind of a system for how long you plan to keep properties? I'm guessing maybe with your syndications, you guys have more of a target exit date, or do you?
Absolutely. I mean, because it's a syndication, you got to disclose that up front. I'm not a seller normally, and I mean, I've sold a few properties here and there over the years, but I'm more of a buy and holder of real estate because I believe in the long-term wealth building aspect of real estate and paying mortgages down and principal reduction and play an increasing cash flow over the years and everything like that. So that's normally the way that I play it. But we typically tell investors that between 5 and 7 years is when I will offer them an exit. The way that I've done it up until now is to exit them, but find a way to stay in myself.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Okay. So you're using the syndication to acquire the property, and then you are able to then to buy them out over time.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And I assume then 5 to 7 years, it's property's got enough equity in it. Or how do you do that? Let's talk about the buyout. Are you raising? Do you have other cash that or how are you doing that? Because if the value of the property is risen based on the profitable operation of it, right? You've got an increased NOI. You bought it for X, now it's X plus the value.
Yep.
How are you
paying your mortgage down? You're paying your mortgage down over time, so you're creating a spread, an equity spread in your mortgage amount versus what the property's worth.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So over time, you're building a case for a refinance, and you either just refinance with the investors. This has to be clear in your operating agreement on what the investor's predetermined buyout's going to be. And they're going to want some sort of a multiple on their as their return and everything like that. And it's also going to matter like how much you paid them to date in a return on their money. So you're going to offer them you're going to pre-agree on some sort of a number to exit. Or a percentage to exit from the property. And it could be just, if they have 10% ownership of the property, if it appraises for X, you deduct out the mortgage amount and they get 10% as that number for their buyout. So they get their share of the asset value at the time of the refinance. That could be a way to buy out. And that. So those are different structures, but my advice is to make sure that you're clear on it in your operating agreement before you even close on the building, that you tell investors that you're defining their exit. So, but short answer to your question is, you want to refi it and produce some cash to buy them out at that point.
Got it. Now you're the first guy I've talked to that syndicates, that actually has kind of more of a longer buy hold. I like that because I've always my everything you were talking about, paying down the principal and increasing the equity and the cash flow over time has been my model. It's just been it's always made sense to me. It doesn't. I was buying properties when they weren't necessarily appreciating, or I wasn't even thinking about the appreciation. It was just more about the paying down the mortgage and getting that spread there, and it always made sense to me. So
we've looked at deals where they're refinancing sooner, where there's like a major value add component that needs to happen, like the 70% occupied building in Charlotte would have been a good one for this, where you would have gone in. You would have fit out the vacant units. You would have gotten the bad apples out and get the property performing to market. and then you would have then refinanced to pull out all investor capital and give it back to them, but then let them retain a percentage of ownership long term in the property. But it becomes a minority stake versus what your stake is. So maybe they'd stay in for a ride along long term in that, but it's a smaller chunk of the pie after you've refinanced the property and bought them out completely.
Got it.
That's another way. It's just another way you can do it.
Yeah. No, I like it. I like it a lot. Man, I'm looking at kind of our time. I didn't realize how long we've been chatting along here, but it's all been good.
Right?
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, is there any kind of a summary statement that you would offer up to the listeners as to kind of our system conversation here?
Well, I think you got to plan your work and work your plan, and so that means that I try and play the long game as best I can. Meaning, if you allow yourself in purchasing property and in this business to stay in response mode, I think that you will. But I think that I try and be as proactive as I can and try and think further out. And also I document as best I can to make written action plans and say, this is what I want to do. These are the accomplishments I'm going to make. I'm going to check this, check this, check this, check this. And I document that plan before I even leave my desk to go look at the property. And then I keep that plan documented so I can use it again. So I'm a advocate of not having to repeat things. And so writing them down and then not having to document it ever again because it's written. And so using that same script over and over again. So I think that's the advice I would give is don't be afraid to document a plan that you can recirculate and use again. And also, I mean, again, I've been in business for 11 years. I revise and tweak and upgrade my plan every time I do it. And so it doesn't have to be set in stone that everything that write a plan, but write it in pencil.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I like your thought of the long view. I think real estate has been very sexy as of late. Last 10 years as far as big returns. I think that a lot of the focus has been on the quick in and out kind of thing, and I think that sometimes. Who knows what's going to happen now? We're looking at interest rates going up, and maybe the
people that are playing the quick in and out game right now in this business might not be around if we have another downturn, which I'm not a subscriber to that. Like a lot of people I talk to are just waiting for the crash. I don't think the tea leaves are set up for a crash of the real estate market again. I see a crash on the stock market coming, but that's just me. That's also because I'm not a big advocate of the stock. I'm more of a real estate guy, but than a stock market guy anyway. But I think that the folks that play the long game, to your point, are the ones that are going to wait out, that are going to make it long term in this business. I think that real estate intrinsically is a long game. And folk, you can play it short right now only because it's good. And this business can make everybody look really good because of how it appreciates, and it can make everybody look like a genius, So
yeah, but if the music stops and you're left, and
it does,
if you're leveraged.
I was listening to a podcast this morning, and the guy was doing like 6 condo conversions, of different buildings, and he's slaying it, making a lot of money. But as you said, if the music stops when he's halfway through those condo conversions, man, he better have a plan B. And for me, I was flipping a bunch of houses in 2008 when the market dipped, and we ended up leasing them, and I still own those properties. So that was my backup plan, was to rent these places out instead of selling them. I still own these. It's 2017, and I still own these houses. So
well, and like you said, though, you had a plan B.
You have to.
I think that if you don't have that foresight to somehow think through it and know what you're going to do if the music stops or the rules change or whatever, you could be very, very, very disappointed. So
and again, it's a cyclical business. So
yeah. Cool. Hey, Matt, before we wrap up, do me a favor and tell the listeners how they can find you.
Sure. We are at derosagroup.com. That's DEROSA group.com. They can, as you mentioned, we have a very active YouTube page. They can find me on YouTube by just searching for Derosa Group. I'm an active contributor to biggerpockets.com. They can find me on there under my name, Matt Faircloth, on Bigger Pockets. That should be it, and just through our website, you can hit the contact us button, shoot us a line, say hello if you'd like to.
All right. Well, hey,
Yeah.
Matt, I appreciate you taking the time today. It's been a lot of fun, and I look forward to doing it again soon.
Cool. Great. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been an honor to be here.